All right. The time is 6 o'clock. I'm calling to order a regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Sunset Valley, Texas for Tuesday, July 16th, 2024. Just as a note before we get started, Councilmember Burrell is out sick tonight, so he won't be attending tonight's meeting, but we do have quorum for council for making any decisions. Also, just as a note, we do have two items on the agenda, 8 and 9, which we will be calling a public hearing for. So those items, everybody will get a chance to speak if they are here to speak to those items, but you can also make comments during the public comment agenda item, which is coming up next. And with that, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 2, which is public comments.
My name is Dan Horrigan. This is the Sunset Valley Arts Commission, seeks to promote the arts and culture of tourism in a vibrant city. The mural Nature Walk on the front cover, created by the residents of Sunset Valley, is a fine example. God created the rainbow with 7 colors. I'm seeking agendas for the political symbols to be removed. The donkey, the elephants. This is my second attempt to get the Police Department of Sunset Valley some pay raises put on your agenda. By raising raw honey to sell at your farmer's market. And I'm seeking term limits on council members because homemaking skills are important to the man. By removing the perversity of the mob, which degrades the protection and mutual restraints developed in the interest of all parties, combatants and civilians. Jezebel's spirit shuts down the voice of reason, and there's a history of abuses. And with disregard to the common people, provoking conflict of feminists with cruel and unusual practices, their symbols and idols to consider, such as Moloch the owl. It may be a she, and perhaps a she-he, that looks suspicious. There's another issue with 1,000 identities in your setback, and only one of me. The Holy Bishop Mari Emanuel lost an eye during the stabbing, and I lost 23 years of peace and a brother. In the early 1900s, they used Moloch to describe a person operating under cold rationalism, something they viewed as degeneration of Western civilization. They described Moloch as a modern city witch who demands sacrifice and social, economic, or military oppression, debasing a society, mainly Western culture, that began its experience with the fascination of the demons. You can search through the Bible if you care to. Have a good night.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? All right, we'll move on to agenda number 3, which is staff reports, starting with the city administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to highlight a few items on the admin report and then take any questions. So we have engaged with our new auditors, Brooks, Watson and Company, for the fiscal year 2023 audit. It is going fairly well. They seem to be a great firm to work with. We've already worked on our internal testings and doing some other questionnaires. And just to let you all know, I do have questionnaires for Mayor and each council member. I have paper copies if you want to fill it out in paper, or I can email it to you. So just let me know after the meeting. So that is going well. Reminder that candidate filing begins this Saturday and will be Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 up until Monday, August 19th at 5 p.m. That is the deadline for filing. It is for the mayor and for 2 council member spaces. We'll be sending an eye contact notice out. Upcoming events, there is a senior puppet show at WellMed on July 23rd. Wanted to discuss with you all the schedule for the fiscal year 2025 budget adoption. So the mayor, according to our financial policies in the state, must file the budget by August 12th. However, we do have a target date, let me turn this down, of August 9th. We are going to try to have the budget filed and published by August 9th. As per our discussions and work sessions, there are proposed rate increases, utility rate increases, and we will be preparing notices that will go out in the July and August utility bills, informing residents of the plan for council to potentially adopt new rates. There will also be information on the website and Engagement HQ. The first budget presentation will be in the second council meeting in August, August 20th. The official budget public hearing will be Tuesday, September 3rd. And we would have a regular meeting scheduled for September 17th. However, Councilmember Burrell will be out of the country, and we would like a full council when we discuss and finally adopt the budget. So we are potentially going to reschedule the budget adoption for Tuesday, September 24th. So please let me know if you all have any conflicts for Tuesday, September 24th. Then we would most likely cancel the first meeting in October because that is National Night Out. Correct, Chief? Tuesday the 1st? Yes, so potentially if we change that meeting, the second meeting in September, the budget adoption to happen September 24th, then hopefully we do not have to meet again until Tuesday, October 15th. So just, please let me know if you're not available the 24th. And that's all I have for the admin report.
Questions for the administration report? Everybody's checking their calendars for the 24th. All right, we'll verify we can do that. Councilmember Johnson.
Sometimes that question just like pops in your head, even though, I don't know, you've seen it a million times before. Who negotiates the contract with the Austin Fire Department?
That has been myself, and then I've had Jerry involved because we have proposed some changes to the way the development review happens. It has been, so far, I would say, a very successful negotiation. The price is not increasing very much at all, and instead of increasing it by, they already know this. they pitched this to us, and instead of increasing by 3% a year, it's only increasing by 1% every year. So we will, that will come for adoption before the budget is adopted, but the rates will go into effect October 1st, the new rate. So.
Oh, cool, thank you.
Oh. Okay. So we may have to look for an alternative date, or someone may just have to be absent for
Yeah.
the budget adoption.
We'll work for a date where all council members can be present because
Yes.
it is such an important meeting.
Yes.
And I'll work with the city administrator to identify some possible alternatives. All right, any other questions for the city administrator? Okay, moving on to Public Works.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to highlight a few items and then I can answer any questions if anybody has any questions. First of all, we did do some research into grant opportunities for City Hall backyard, specifically the Texas Parks and Wildlife Recreational Grant. That one has a deadline that was August 1st, and it requires the properties to be actually dedicated parkland, and we don't have that process at this time. So we can't apply for a grant, that particular grant that they have open right now for that particular property, and it's something that I know we've discussed parkland dedication policy and a program for that in the past, and so that's something we're going to look at bringing back and discussing with the council in the next coming months. So, for example, if we wanted to, there's a different grant opportunity that opens up in February, that has a deadline in February, excuse me, that we may be able to do something with 6107 Brody for that, if the city wants to do a dedicated parkland for that project. Second, we do have 2 bids we received for the Savannah Trail and ERW and Home Depot Boulevard kind of improvements. We're still reviewing those bids, and then we're going to discuss a few parts of that, some of the alternatives and stuff, with the Public Works Committee and in the Planning and Environmental Committee when they meet in August, at the beginning of August, and then we'll return those. We'll have a recommendation for council at August 6th. Then finally, the solar installation began today for the Public Works building. Those panels are going up on the garage roof, but it actually powers the Public Works building. It was just had a much better orientation on the garage than the Public Works building does. And they're finalizing everything for the police department, and we'll hopefully be having all of that completed in in the coming weeks. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the Public Works report? All right, thank you. Moving on to public safety.
Good evening. I'll start off with the good news. It says on my report that we hired 2 officers. Today we made an offer to a 3rd officer, and for the first time since in 6 years, I have more candidates than I have positions available. So I have 1 more position, and I have 3 candidates for that final position, and all good candidates. So, this is good news for us, and it's the first since I've been here. So I'm glad to report that. I have more good news. Our own Officer Brownlow last month was awarded a scholarship to attend a law enforcement leadership conference at Mayan Ranch in Bandera. It's worth about $1,100, and it pays for the training, food and board for a week at Mayan Ranch. And he was competing with officers all over the state, and they picked him. So good news for us. If you have any questions, let me know.
Congratulations to Officer Brownlow, and glad to hear the recruiting is going well as well. Any questions for public safety?
We were hoping he'd be here tonight so we can congratulate him, so please send our congratulations.
I sure will, and he's the one that's been doing the background checks on all these new hires, so he's been busy all day.
You got it.
Any other questions for public safety? All right, thank you. And that concludes agenda item number 3, and we're going to move on to agenda number 4, which is consideration of agenda items for approval on consent. And Councilmember Rosengarten?
I move to approve on consent agenda items number 5, the regular meeting minutes of 6/4/24, and the called meeting of 6/11/24. Number 6, temporary special use permit, which is September 7th. Number 7, concrete at $175 a yard. The only thing is, want to make sure that it's a good value. And that's it.
Okay, so the motion is to approve on consent item number 5, 6, and 7.
Yep.
Are there any removals from that list? Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Councilmember Medicus seconds. All those in favor of approving on consent item number 5, 6, and 7, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we approved on consent. Item number 5, the minutes from the June 4th, 2024 regular meeting and June 11th, 2024 called meeting. Item number 6, approval of a temporary special use permit for Austin Pets Alive to host a community event on Saturday, September 7th, 2024 at 4942 US Highway 290. And item number 7, award of bid to Zevex Materials LLC to supply ready-mix concrete pursuant to RFP number 05282024A. All right, well, council, that'll take us to our next agenda item, which these 2 agenda items are public hearings, so we will be opening public hearings for each of these items and then closing them before we take any action, so similar to what we do on all public hearings. Also, just as a note for members of the public who have been trying to provide comments, our new website, community engagement site, was reported to have some issues with some comments not being able to get posted, although there are a lot of comments registered and logged there that are pertinent to both 8 and 9. We also send out an iContact notifying residents. They can also send, as always, their comments to the city council via our website as well. And then the city administrator did collect those comments and sent them to all council members. So hopefully that's a comprehensive, includes everything that we've gotten from the city, but we're working to resolve the issue. We think we've got it resolved so that, that comments can be gathered in the future. But hopefully it didn't prevent anybody from putting comments in that would have otherwise. But I think we had 21 comments in total. Is that correct?
So we had 2 more that were just emailed. 23
comments. So these are obviously.
Jerry has the numbers of, it's 18 in favor, 5 against.
Okay. So there's obviously been a lot of, feedback, and this is great. We always want to have that engagement from the community as we consider these type of items. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing for agenda item number 8 at 6:15. And with that, the public hearing for possible action on a change in zoning for city-owned property known as the Uplands Tract located at southeast corner of MSG Bob Horgan Trail and US 290 from Government Utility Institutional, GUI, to Parkland under section 150.064 of the Land Development Code. And I'll hand it over to the city administrator for introduction this item, or Jerry. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jerry Rustoven, the Development Services Manager. On February 6th of this year, the council passed a resolution directing the staff to initiate the process for rezoning the property known as the Uplands Tract. What we call the Uplands Tract is actually two pieces of property. One is commonly referred to as a triangle. It's a 1.129 acre tract on the west side of Horgan Trail. The other one, the larger 7.65 acre tract, is on the eastern portion. As the mayor said, the requested zoning is from GUI, Government Utility Institutional, to P Parkland. This would comport with the Parks and Open Space Plan, which was approved by the council in January of last year. The future land use map currently identifies the property as GUI. Item 9 on this agenda would change that FLUM future land use map to Parkland. The property to the west of the subject tracts is zoned GUI, the Tony Berger Center. Property to the south is also zoned GUI, which is Sunset Valley Elementary School. And the properties to the east are within the city of Austin, are zoned multifamily and commercial services. The staff has published a notice as required by law in the Austin American Statesman and mailed notice to people within 500 feet. As Matt just mentioned, we've received, before the two came in, I think about 18 in favor and about 5 against the zoning case. And the case was recommended by the Zoning Commission with 1 vote against. And with that, I'm available for any questions on item number 8.
So council, for the public hearing portion, if you have any questions to direct to staff, let's go ahead and do that this time. And then I'll open it up for members of the public who wish to speak to do so. And then we'll close the public hearing, and then we will go to deliberations, which you'll have another opportunity to ask questions and to speak as well. And if there are any motions to be made, we can make them at that time. So any council members have any questions for staff at this time before I open it up to the public? Councilmember Rosengart?
I don't understand what the importance is of changing the zoning to Parkland when, as it is, GUI number 4 says it can be used as a park as it is. It doesn't need to be changed. Gives more flexibility, and it allows options. Do you agree?
I agree that there are more uses allowed under GUI than under Parkland. And I also agree that park is allowed as a permitted use in the existing GUI zoning.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson?
I have a ton of notes on this. I'm going to ask questions sporadically through, so sorry about that. So this is the process to go from GUI to park, and we send it to zoning. Well, it gets suggested from some other committee or whatever. It ends up at zoning. I guess we send it to zoning.
We send it to zoning.
P&E sent to us or whatever, we sent to zoning, zoning sent it back.
Y'all passed a resolution saying start the process, and that's one of the steps
Yeah.
of the process.
So is the process the same going the other direction? Anytime you go zoning, it's pretty much the same, right? You change zoning?
Yeah, any zoning change needs to go to the zoning commission, yes.
Right, so there's no any extra process that has to be involved anytime you switch zoning, correct?
I'm sorry, what is the first part?
There's no extra process. It's like zoning A to zoning B is always going to be the same process.
Yes.
Yep. I think I heard there in the zoning meeting, we're prohibited from putting it to a vote, right? Like we're not allowed
Yes,
to a
yes.
vote of the residents. Like
To
it's not
put it
something-
on the ballot, cannot put it on the ballot.
Can't put it on a ballot.
Yeah, the council is the only authority for zoning. There's no possibility for a
Okay.
citizen referendum on zoning.
I see that suggested so many times, and I feel like it should be just at the top of our list of ordinances. It's like, stop reading right here if you're suggesting a vote on changing land. If we wanted to sell a GUI property, that wouldn't ever go before residents, right?
No.
So but no one would really buy it unless it got rezoned, right?
Chances are, I mean, they always could, you know, I mean, people can buy things.
Yeah,
Chances are, 100% chance, somebody would buy it with a condition
yeah,
that prior to the contract being closed, a zoning change would occur to whatever they're hoping to get, so.
and that's true for whatever the current zoning is to whatever the zoning they want it to go to, right? We
Yeah,
had it-
generally speaking, you know, other GUI or P parkland would probably not have a use that somebody would find, you know, commercially viable.
Okay, what is, I guess Parkland is just more restrictive in like what you can do there.
Yes, it's pretty much parks.
Yeah.
And GUI allows parks as well as, you know, something like City Hall or, you know, a utility substation,
Okay.
things like that.
Okay, so I have more questions about like the value of the land, but I'll get to that later. If something, this is something I noticed when I started first having memories as a child. I would see land get developed, and then, especially in the Northeast, that land, whatever they built there is like no longer used, and then it just sits there and it just decays. And I guess nature kind of takes it over, but there is no way to really unwind a developed property, right? It's just kind of like somebody owns it, they just say like, that business didn't work out, it just sits there kind of fallow and,
It can, it just depends on the economics, of course, of the situation. I think certainly these days, it's incumbent upon cities to have redevelopment because annexing property has become very much harder due to changes in state law. And so in order for a city to grow its, you know, traditional property tax base, you need redevelopment to occur. And so you may have seen recently the city of Austin has been loosening some of their regulations to encourage redevelopment because they understand that redevelopment is the ticket to the financial future, given that you can no longer expand your, you know, your city limit lines.
yeah. But it would never go, it's a almost 0% chance that land that is developed would ever go back to a park. I've seen in New York where it's just like a landfill gets turned into a park. So that seems to be like, you know, one end, but very rarely have I ever seen, you know, a shopping center and then all of a sudden they're just like, we're gonna go back to park and tear down the building, remove the asphalt, abate any toxic materials, whatever.
I think, you know, obviously if you wanted to develop a park, it would be cheaper to choose raw land than it would be to something you'd have to,
Yeah.
you know, demolish and remediate, yes.
So it just seems like sometimes it seems like the terminal state of some land, if it doesn't end up as like park, is maybe it continues to be used as, like in Manhattan, like there's no just abandoned buildings, you know, it's such valuable, but if you get into areas where land is a little bit cheaper, it seems like the terminal state of land sometimes is just like an empty building, right? We don't see that a lot around Austin.
No, and it all gets back to economics, you know, and the desire of the owner, of course. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have properties held by families that, you know, they just want to hold on to the property and give it to their
Yeah.
kids or whatever. But most of the time, it just simply has to do with economics is, you know, what's the property worth? What's the best, you know, economically supportable use for the property? And does the selling price make sense?
Okay, so maybe that's good. We had a, what's the word? Assessment or a appraisal done on that property. And what was it?
I'm not sure Matt might know. I think, if I recall correctly, I think we paid about 1.6 million for it, if I remember right. My guess on the current land value, it's come down recently, but I would guess last year it would have been in the range of 3 to 5 million.
Pardon?
3 to 5 million.
3 to 5 million, okay. And what is our city budget? It's like
$8 million a year.
$8 million a year? If, okay. This is a difficult one. How much,
Revenue or expenses?
Well, I'm just thinking, just like, if you had to just like quickly say like what our budget is, it's like $8 million. That's what you'd say, right? Not getting it, if you weren't a city administrator and you said, what is the, yeah. Do we have any idea of, and this is a hard number, and I tried to like kind of map this out in different ways, like how much sales tax, if that was commercial and it was something that brings in sales tax, like how much would that even generate?
Depends on what's on there.
Depends, you know, if it was like a WellMed, it's zero. If it's a,
Depends.
you know, if it is an Apple store, it brings in a lot, but yeah. But like restaurant, I don't know, just like how much of an impact would something like that even make to our overall city budget?
Yeah, I think, you know, as Councilman Rosengren said, it would depend upon the use. You know, it's about, you know, 7, 8 acres worth of property. One would be a little harder to develop because of the shape, the triangle, but the other property, you know, for here, you know, it's called the uplands because none of it's in the critical water quality zone. Would be subject to our impervious cover limits, of course, but it would really depend upon what the use is. You know what I mean? Like everything, you know, restaurant versus retail would be a mix of restaurant and retail, you know, what kind of thing. But if I had to guess, you know, based upon some other things we've looked at over time, I would say probably, you know, between 250 and 300, between 250 and 400,000 a year.
250, 400 a year?
Yes.
Okay. That, I know that's like just completely thrown against the wall. I would never
very
hold
much
that
so.
to you.
So-
Very, very much so, yes.
So I have the latest appraisal that was done back in 2020, again, you know, and they did hypothetical market value scenarios. 20% impervious cover, 4 million, 42%, 5 million, 75.6, closer to 6 million. But again, that would be having to get increasing amounts of variances.
Yeah.
And that's just the property value. That's not how much it's going to generate.
And interest rates and land values were very different 4 years ago than they are today.
Yes.
There's no kind of like narrative in my questions. It's just like taking a look at questions that people ask either in zoning or like on the message boards or ask me directly and there just seems to, and they're not going to listen to this either, but at least I'll be more educated next time I go into talk to someone about it. I think the last one was to have a liquor license on that, currently there's a school right there, right? But that's up to us.
Yes, if it's within 300 feet, which it is, the city council would have to approve any type of either off-premise or on-premise
Okay.
licensing.
So that is not really something that is a barrier either. That is not like a hard law. That is up to us
Yes.
providing a variance. Okay, I'll probably have more questions, but thank you.
Councilor Rosengarten?
I move that we go to an executive session.
If there's a motion to go into executive session, is there a second for that?
Council members, I think, I have a lawyer over here.
Ooh, we didn't
We'll
put the
probably
words
jump in
on.
a second, but with regard to zoning, there's a very limited scope of things that you're allowed to
Sure.
discuss in executive session. So I think that before either we go to executive session and you state why, and the lawyer tells us we can continue or not, but that's why I let you know ahead of time that there is a limited ability of things you can discuss, you know, generally speaking with regard to executive session, but with zoning, it's an even smaller universe.
Okay. So what topic can we not talk about?
Well, there's the executive session, you can call it to consult with the city's attorney pursuant to Texas Government Code
Correct.
551.071 and the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct,
Safeguarding.
Section 101.05, deliberation of personnel matters. So if anything, this would probably fall under consultation with the city attorney, but, you know, I think there would have to be a, you know, discussion just to make sure it does fall under that. And so the executive session motion probably, if you want to amend that to include pursuant to Texas Government Code, that 551, the consultation with the city attorney, if that's what the intent is.
To include what you said.
And
I don't have it in front of me, so.
so I think the motion is
Yes, I
to
could.
move to executive session to discuss this item pursuant, with the city attorney pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071. And if that's
Yeah, I think we can go into executive session, see what the topic would be,
Right.
and our lawyer will inform us about whether that's something that we can discuss in private or
Correct.
not.
I think
And then the
it's
other question I have
Texas Code
for the
551.
city attorney is, can we go to executive session while we have a public hearing going? We open the hearing.
Yes.
Okay. So if possible, what I'd like to do is
Finish this.
finish the public hearing, and then if we can revisit that after we've closed the public hearing, that will be a clean approach.
The other idea, Mayor, too, you could also just table the item for right now. You know, we could do the executive session and pick
And
up
then-
when we come back.
Take it off the
Either
table.
one.
and
Even
come
with the
back.
public hearing open?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson?
Another suggestion is, I don't know what you want to ask. You can also just, we could just take a recess and you can go ask him. Is that possible? Because like,
Well,
I think it'd be cleaner if we just all went and
okay.
came back as a group.
Okay, so if we can do this in order, I think we would table
Yeah, you can
the
just
public
say,
hearing,
table this item.
this item.
Council's going to go into recess, or go into executive session. We'll go in there and discuss whatever we're going to discuss. And then we'll come back out and pick up where we were.
Okay. And is that included in one motion, just for clarity, tabling the item and going to executive
I
session?
think you can do that on one motion, yes.
Okay.
I move to table the discussion and to go into executive session
And table the item
reconvene
until we complete
after
executive session.
executive
Okay.
session, yes.
Is there a second for this?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor of tabling this item until, and going into executive session and resuming this item once we return from executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Aye?
All opposed, say nay.
Nay. You're hit,
I
Mark.
am the tiebreaker. I will say aye for the purposes of making sure that we include all the items that council members may be concerned with. So we're going to table this item at 6:31 and move into executive session at this time. And we'll return without taking action. All right, we're returning from executive session at 6:38, and we're going to resume our public hearing of agenda item number 8. And with that, I'll continue to allow council to ask questions of staff before we open up to the public, if any members of council wish to speak. Councilmember Rosengarten?
So I have a question for legal. So if Rosengarten Enterprises decided on the Uplands as a property that they would like to rent from the city and decided to put a pavilion on the property and put trails on the property, allowing the city to use it whenever they wanted to, would that be an obligation that we have to share with the residents of Sunset Valley? And the Rosengarten Enterprise would do a revenue-generating business on the front of the property?
I think it was something that was proposed. I think the negotiations up to the point where it needed to be presented to the public could be held in closed session if the negotiations were the same as similar as a purchase of property that you wanted to hold that close to your chest so you can negotiate it properly.
Understand you correctly, 3 or 4 council, depending on how the vote goes, 3 council could decide on a situation such as what I presented, and it never be presented to the residents. Is that correct?
So the sale of property, yes.
No sale,
A lease,
lease.
right? You could still, that would still be appropriate for a closed session because that would be negotiating property rights.
And I guess what I'm asking is there a moral obligation on after, let's say, trying to figure out how to word this without, is there an obligation, if the answer is moving forward on letting Rosengarten Enterprises rent the property, then of course we have to keep it confidential, it sounds like. If the votes from council are not to move forward, after the fact, do we have an obligation to tell the residents?
So if the city council determined not to move forward, the specific discussions in closed session would not be appropriate to discuss with in the open session.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, in executive session, there are no votes taken. This is, it's all votes are taken in public. And so for it to get to that point, it has to be an agenda item. And of course, council members can sponsor agenda items or request they be put on the agenda. But we don't take votes in closed session, just as make sure that that's clear from us.
So for example, Councilmember, in the case you were giving, if the council were considering a lease on a piece of city-owned property, the negotiations of the lease would probably occur at the staff level, and then we would present it to the council in executive session probably multiple times. In the end, if the council decided to move forward with that lease, it would become an agenda item, as the mayor said,
Right.
and the terms of the lease would be, of course, public at that time prior to the council voting on it. So the citizens would know what
What is happening?
what is happening, but the negotiations part of it would be done, either by the staff or, with input from the council in executive session. But in the end, of course, the public would know of any real estate transaction, be it a lease or a purchase that the council takes.
So basically, 3 people on council can make the decision for the whole city, whether this was to succeed or to fail, and before it's ever introduced to the residents, because that information would be only privy to looking at process. All I'm basically doing is saying, what is the process? So if something like that was to happen, only 3 council, so all you need is 3 votes, would be able to say yes or no before it ever would be presented to residents.
Well, I think it would depend upon whether a council member wanted to put an item on the agenda or not. Of course, the staff would hope that if we were in the middle of negotiations, it would wait until those negotiations came out and finished, and then there'd be an up or down vote. But if a majority of the council decides not to move forward with a potential real estate transaction, generally it stops there because there's nothing, it's obviously not going to pass. And so and usually items aren't put on that are doomed for failure. But as Darren said, if we discuss something in executive session, then it generally stays there unless there's a final result of it, such as a legal settlement or a real estate transaction.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking is because I'm a Realtor, and I know responsibilities regarding real estate. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a note, I mean, this is it's relevant because in a general statement, we've had interest in this property from developers and various, stages of negotiation or interest have, gotten to the point where it may have been discussed by council or presented to council. There's been some public versions of that where it's gotten to the point of having it be an agenda item. The most recent example of that, I believe, was when there was a proposal to put a lighting signage on
A billboard, yes.
on a billboard, right, using the Triangle property, and that would be a lease agreement. The other instance that I remember as a council member is when the Austin Fire Department was interested in leasing the land and locating their new fire station, which is now located off of the frontage road for 71. And that was a public discussion as well, because it had gotten to the point where council was ready to vote on it, and it was up for that discussion. I don't know if there's any other instances where it's gotten past that point where it's become an agenda item, but that's just to show that there has been interest in that property. There have been certain cases where it's moved forward to the point of public discussion and council action. And I can guess, asking staff, there's probably been other instances where staff has gotten solicitations on those properties that,
There have, yes.
Yeah.
Not just this property, but other.
But
other
properties
city
in general for the city,
Yes.
yeah. But, yeah. Other questions from council members before we open it up for members of the public? All right, members of the public that wish to speak to this item, please go to the podium, state your name and address, and please limit your comments to the time allotted. In case we do have a lot of comments, we did bring our timer, but we don't have a lot of people in person. We did get a lot of comments on this item via input over the website as well as email.
Burton Pearson, 39 Pillow Road. I don't think much more needs to be said about this, but I think we always need to remember in the background right now, science says we're in the 6th mass extinction on planet Earth. This particular one is caused by humanity. Our species name is Homo sapiens. It means wise man, and so it's pretty crazy that we are the cause of this 6th major extinction that endangers our very life support system. We do not have the technologies in place to support human life without nature. When we destroy nature, we destroy even the way to restore it, because we lose the genetic information necessary to rebuild the habitats. So we're on a downward spiral that has to be stopped. Right now, for development, we must repurpose developed property and not develop any more property, period, in order to stop and stave this off, or we're going to be in just an incredible amount of suffering and I think ultimately extinction. So this is why I favor saving what open space we have, since there's so little of it left, and we need to stop this mass extinction. Thank you all. I'm in favor of zoning the uplands for parkland. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Bruner, members of the council, I'm Russell Harding, 10 Pillow Road. And I'm here to support the change of the Uplands property zoning to parkland. Now, I know there's concern about if we do that, it'll be difficult to change it back or to do something else with the property. And I think that's the very reason we need to change it to protect this valuable and important green space. And why do we care about green space? Well, there's several reasons. First of all, green space, plants, trees, shrubs, and so forth, they absorb carbon, keep it out of the atmosphere, and ultimately out of the ozone layer, which it needs to stay out from. Secondly, green space serves as a deterrent to flooding. During heavy storms, it'll absorb the water, it'll also impede the flow of water, reducing the possibility of a flood. It also provides habitat for wildlife species such as birds, butterflies, and other things, and we shouldn't minimize the importance of that habitat for other species. These are important to the overall life cycle of a human experience, or biodiversity, as it were. And as far as the aesthetic aspect, I think most people would say that parks and trees are, and other green space, are much more pleasant to be around and deal with than a concrete office building. Maybe not everybody. We're losing green space at a huge rate, not only here in Central Texas, but throughout the United States and throughout the world. And it's going to continue. As Austin continues to grow, there's going to be more need for housing, industrial development, as well as residential development. You may have seen recently in the newspaper about industrial development here in Tesla. Today that's 127 acres of a nice green field. Next year, it's going to be warehouses. A few years ago, when I had a lake house up on Lake LBJ, I would drive out 71, and there would be all the way out there just trees and grass and nice fields. You go out there today, there's developments, houses, commercial, all the way out to 281, which is a highway to the lake. So development's going to occur, and greenhouse is going to be lost here or there. But I think this is an opportunity for us to preserve what green space we have. And finally, I would just want to mention to you that this has been recommended by the Zoning Commission, been recommended by the Parks and Open Space Committee, and they did that after conducting resident surveys. I remember I responded to 2 surveys about what to do with the Upper Cooper Creek and also the uplands. And they held meetings where people would come and comment on it. And following that, this is what the recommendation they came up with. So I really think it would be a mistake for the council to ignore the recommendations of its committees and commissions and boards. It would make some people wonder why we volunteer to serve on them if it's not going to count for anything. Anyway, for all these reasons, I would recommend the changing of the zoning to parkland.
Okay. Thank you very much. Other members of the public that wish to speak at this time? And before taking a second public comment, please let other people go before.
Randy Rosengarten, 25 Yellowtail. Mayor, council members, staff, and public, thank you for being here on this important issue. I would just wanted to reiterate what Rob was kind of driving at. I mean, moving this from GUI to parks doesn't prevent future councils or even this council from selling it, and you go through a rezoning process. You'd have to do it from GUI to commercial, as was pointed out, in order to make it useful for a developer. So this shell game doesn't impact the ability to sell. All it does is restrict council or restrict the zoning from GUI to parks, which eliminates some of the options that council has, keeping the zoning the same. Parks is already in GUI, so I don't understand that. And then as far as the argument about green space, I think that the next move on this particular piece of property is put a pavilion, a parking lot, trails and places for farmers market pavilions or setups, tents, and that sort of thing. So that's not a use of green space. And I also have a question about that. Isn't a farmer's market a commercial enterprise? Is that compatible with the park's zoning? Seems like you'd want to still keep it GUI and have that flexibility to have a farmer's market, whereas parks and green space, that's not a farmer's market. As far as the survey, I know that there was plenty of people that I understand responded to those surveys. They love parks, don't get me wrong, but the Uplands was not a suitable location for that. The noise level from 290 there is tremendous. It's not conducive to a park, and it's valuable as potential commercial property. Secondly, the zoning meeting did not recommend. All the zoning meeting was stamped at the request of the zoning committee that the request met the conditions for approving a zoning change. There was no recommendation. Anyways, thank you much.
Thank you very much. Other members of the public that haven't had a chance to speak yet?
Hello, I'm Cindy Walker, 15 Pillow Road, and I'm just here in support of changing the zoning to parkland. I think it's important that we protect the areas that we have, especially here in Sunset Valley, where we're so fortunate to have such lovely green spaces, and for the future of everybody, I think it's important. And I'm here in support of that.
Great, thank you.
Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Reese, Mayor, Council. Thank you all for being here and considering this. I wrote in my comments about when we planned things. When we planned the meadows, people took a lot of time and energy to make sure that the meadows was this beautiful new development surrounded by green. When we planned the villas, we planned it to be low income, more moderate, and surrounded by green. And when we started acquiring land for the city, we planned to surround it with green. And you can tell that from when we did buying both the properties at the entrance to Westgate and Jones. We bought properties on Brody, and we did a pocket park. So anytime we could possibly find a place to put green, as I've watched us for 20 some odd years now, 25 years, or I don't know how long I've been here, but a long time now, since '98, we have always taken opportunities to surround ourselves with green. When people do this, it makes the property values go up. When people don't do this, we get these areas of poverty. That's the difference. Whether we have trees or not is what makes a difference in affluence in this country. And there's the environmental reasons, but then there are just reasons like that. And it's and when I first moved here, we had a Wolf's Nursery there, which I used to frequent, and then it went down, and then we put restaurants, and 290 was not really conducive for a lot of these businesses, which is how we ended up with a WellMed there. And the same problems are going to be there with the Uplands. So people say this is this great opportunity to have this great money-making thing. 2 blocks over, it didn't work, you know? And so on this other gamble, we're gambling our green space from the vision that we had of creating a green area around our city that says, hey, you're in a special place. And I think there's some sort of specious arguments when people say this, because Brody is much more developable. You know, that's a place that people actually could get to, and those properties are really doing that. But no one's saying, let's develop the entrance to the meadows. You know, it's like, it's not in our backyard. And so I'm kind of concerned about that. And I don't want it done anywhere. I really like the vision and the plan that we did, where we put green around everything. And we say, you're in a special green environmental place. It's what we've always created here as long as I've been here, and I think long before, because it was already that way when I got here. So I think that's part of what makes Sunset Valley special, is our environmentalism. We were a tree city back in there. All people, if you weren't at least saying you were environmentalist, you weren't getting elected to council. You know, and I think people change their tune sometimes when they get here, but people all said they were. People say that to get elected, and it's because that's what those of us who live here care about. So I really want people to think about that, how often people say they're environmentalists, whether or not they vote that way, and B, the environmentalists, people said that, because this is what we have continued to elect in Sunset Valley, are people who care about the environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Burton Pearson, 39 Pillow. I'll be real quick now. I forgot to mention this. You know, we're advised to diversify our portfolios when we talk about economic development. And I do want you to know this now, that the Audubon Society has now designated the uplands, 37 Lone Oak and Indian Grass Prairie, as hotspots. This has gone out on eBird, which is an international site, to attract birders. Right now, Austin is ranked 9th in the United States for bird ecotourism, and we will be included in that type of ecotourism. Birders tend to spend more than any other type of tourist. And what I'm saying is, we got a small chance here, and maybe bigger than we know, to move into a green economy, a way to diversify, so that we're not just dependent on those buildings over on Brody, because if a tornado comes through, it could take them out all at once. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Any other comments? Please go ahead and step up to the podium.
I forgot to add. I think there are times in this life when something has value beyond dollars and cents. And I think this is one of those, the preservation of valuable green space. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? All right, at this time I'm going to close the public hearing at 7:01 p.m. And council, we are going to enter into deliberations and possible action on this item. So additional comments or questions from council to staff. Councilmember Medicus.
I move to change the zoning for this city-owned property known as the Uplands Tract, located at the southeast corner of MSG Bob Horgan Trail and US 290, from government utility institutional GUI to parkland under section 150.064 of the Land Development Code.
So the motion is to change the zoning from GUI to parkland. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Motion is seconded, and that opens up for discussion. Councilmember Rosengren?
I enjoy parks. Every morning we go for a walk. We go amongst the trees. We enjoy the trees. The Uplands property is a property against 290. As it is zoned GUI, it is a park. It can be utilized as a park. Simply changing the zoning is restricting it further. It can remain a park for the next 20 years as it is, but it gives you more options one day, whereas changing it to parkland simply restricts it. We were at, my husband and I, were at the zoning commission hearing, and the zoning commission said, basically what we have to do is say, is this piece of property fit to be parkland. Not to say it's going to be changed by zoning, because council makes that decision. Simply doesn't fit the requirements to switch it from GUI to parkland. And the answer by one attorney on the commission said yes. Another attorney on the commission said there is no need to switch it. It's already a park. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson?
Yeah, a lot of the questions that go around in my head about this, I keep on kind of coalescing around certain things. And one is a lot of people that are surrounded, kind of going to what Melissa said, a lot of people that are like nestled deep inside the park system that Sunset Valley has provided, saying that that isn't a park. And when I just draw a circle around what would be the closest park to 25 households in Sunset Valley, how many households do we have? 246, 248? So it's 10% of the residents, that would be the closest park to their house. And I'm one of them, I admit it. To be told that that's like, well, that's not really a park. It's like, well, the rest of the parks are like a half mile away from me. So I'll take it, and it's a lot nicer than I think a lot of people give it credit for. Also, like some of the options, the money, if we need that money, we are screwed. If we cannot make 1/3 of our land commercial and not be able to balance a budget, I don't know what I have to say to those people. I think there needs to be a lot of soul searching during budget season in that situation. There's a third one, I can't think, but it would still be like 2 out of 3. So, I also further restrictions. We went over how you move something from one zoning to another, and it seems like a lot of paper restrictions. It's the same no matter what. The only thing is it like gives a signal as to what we think. Do we get offers on current parkland to buy it?
No.
We do?
Not a few, but not very, much less. But
Okay.
yeah,
So if you're
we'll
out
get
there
cold
and you want to
calls.
buy some of our parks, whatever.
This building would make a nice condo.
But I don't think that is incorrect for what I think a lot of people see that as. I think people in the city are mostly inclined to think of it as a park. And so just putting a label on it that says it's park is not the end of the world. So I don't think it's the end of the world. I want to see it as a park.
Thank you.
That's that.
Councilmember Medicus?
So the reason I think it's important to change the zoning on this is to make clear our intention for this piece of property. The property was acquired in 2006, and in 2008, the first committee was put together, 30-some residents on this committee that looked at what the use of this property should be. And since then, there's a whole long list of committees and groups that have looked at this and made recommendations that this be used for the community good, for a place where the community can gather. And I think it's important for us to finally, after all of these years and the money that we've spent on conceptual plans, the input that we've gotten from the community, it's important for us to make our intentions clear. And so that's why I'm really 100% in favor of changing the zoning so that this is clear to whoever out there is commercial real estate or whoever wants to develop the property, that our intention is for this to be a park for our community to enjoy.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson?
I'm also willing to, as it being the closest park to even, not really here, I guess, but it's a park that we can have some proper amenities on, you know what I mean? And I don't think anyone that wants to see that as a park, except maybe Burton, would have an issue with some amenities like a better home for the farmer's market that can also have pickleball, whatever, just take a corner of it and just do some amenities. I don't think any of us want any of that for the rest of the parkland, we like it as natural as possible. But I think we finally have one where it can be a little more of a touch than just an ADA trail. So I think there's a lot of benefit to having it as park with some, and again, it can be a home to farmer's market because that's a concession that can be run just like the Zephyr. It's not called the Zephyr anymore, is it?
We don't have that. We don't have that use in our code. We'd have to add that,
So we have to add it. There we go.
and we'd have to add it as a special, potentially as a special use allowed in parkland.
Yeah. What is that train called now?
Zilker Eagle.
Zilker something.
Now it's the Zephyr?
It was a Zephyr, I think now it's a Zilker Eagle.
Yeah, the Zephyr was better.
It was Eagle before it was Zephyr, and then it went back to Eagle. But those are done as a concession. You know, what Matt's talking about is I don't think there's a provision in our code for concessions, but you are allowed to, you know, have private uses on parkland, you know, that are, you know, the Eagle's a great example, carousels, the hot dog stand, you know, at Barton Springs. So it is possible. I think that we just have to tweak our code a little bit to do it.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Two things. One, I go in, I'm not going to say I walk my dog because the dog walks me, but about roughly every other day, the dog wants to walk up to the uplands and walk through the uplands. And I'm walking at a time that basically in the morning or the evening is rush hour on 290. And the noise doesn't bother the dog and the noise doesn't bother me either. So I'm not sure I agree with the thing that I've heard that the noise there is terrible. Secondly, every time we ask the citizens what they want, including just now by apparently 18 to 5, if I got those numbers right, or when we did a survey, it's clear what the majority of citizens want. And I think we should do what the majority of citizens want. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item before we move it to vote? All right. All those in favor of changing the zoning for the city-owned property known as the Uplands Tract located at the southeast corner of MSG Bob Horgan Trail and US 290 from Government Utility Institutional to Parkland under section 150.064 of the Land Development Code, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes. And with that, council, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is agenda item number 9. Again, this is going to be a public hearing item. This is to potential action to amend the future land use map in the City of Sunset Valley Comprehensive Plan at the Uplands Tract located at the southeast corner of MSG Bob Horgan Trail and US 290 from Government Utility Institutional to Parkland. So this is just changing the future land use map to align with the zoning change that was just passed by council. And I'm going to open the public hearing at 7:11 p.m. And so members of the public or council, actually, we'll go to council first. Any questions for staff regarding this agenda item? Councilor Johnson.
I just want to thank Jerry for entering flum into the lexicon. I didn't hear that before the zoning, and it has saved me minutes already.
With pleasure.
And we'll open up for members of the public that wish to speak to this proposed future land use map change.
Randy Rosengarten, 25 Yellowtail. I just had a follow-up from before, which may or may not relate to what we're talking about now, but regarding the hypothetical Councilwoman Rosengarten mentioned, so a project could come before council and a developer could offer, extreme example, $200 million to the city to build a Taj Mahal on the uplands. Council members say no. The public can never know about that.
Mayor, do you want me to answer a question?
If you could, please go ahead and address the question. That's fine.
I think the public could find out about it, but what would happen first is that the council, the staff would advise the council in executive session of what was presented. the staff would get a sense from the council about whether they wanted the staff to move forward with that or not. You know, if we did, eventually it may become an agenda item where the staff, the negotiation would already occurred. The public would see, you know, the final deal presented before the council voted on it. If it was a proposal that went nowhere and it was discussed in executive session and there's not a council member who wants to put an item on the agenda related to that, then generally speaking, no, it would stop in the executive session where it moved, where it died, basically.
That's what I thought the answer to be. I just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak during the public hearing?
Melissa Gonzalez, 26 Streets. Just because it floats up about having alcohol and the potential revenue that could come up here, and it's sort of related to this zoning issue. We have a school there, and typically you don't have alcohol in close proximity to a school. Is that not correct?
The council can take action to, the state allows the city council to take action that would
Okay.
waive that requirement, but it
Right.
would take council action.
It would take council action, but generally, in our code, if you have a school close by, we don't generally have alcohol right next door. Is that not correct?
That's one of the criteria of this, to obtain a special use permit.
Yeah.
For alcohol, it asks, you know, is there a church or school within a certain number of feet? And
Yeah.
so the council would sort of have to
Massively
that by
override what is
action,
general
yes.
convention.
Correct.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that to people who keep putting out alcohol, is that it would take council overriding general convention to put alcohol on that property. And I just think that's worth saying out loud, since that seems to float up as a big thing. So just wanted that out in open session, and thank y'all very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak during the public hearing portion of this item? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing at 7:15 p.m. And council, we're going to open deliberations on this item for possible action to amend the future land use map. Mayor Pro Tem?
I make a motion to recommend a change in the future land use map, or the FLUM, as it's called, for the city-owned property known as the Uplands Tract from government utility institutional GUI to Parkland P.
And I think you, instead of making a motion to recommend the change, you're making a motion to make the change.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Just to make sure that's clear. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Councilmember Johnson seconds. It opens up for discussion.
You know, you could also call it the flu map. Just gonna put that one up.
No.
That's a little unfortunate.
It's the flum.
The flum.
FLUM.
They're all respiratory terms.
It's a mutated virus.
Any questions from council or further discussion before we move to a vote? All right, all those in favor of amending the future land use map in the City of Sunset Valley Comprehensive Plan for the Uplands Tract located at the southeast corner of Master Sergeant Bob Horgan Trail and US 290 from GUI to Parkland, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
Nay.
All right, the motion passes. And thank you for, council, your deliberations on this, careful deliberations. I know that it's an important topic for members of our community. And I appreciate everybody's who came in person to give their comments, but also everybody who provide their comments online as well. It's always great when we have this level of community engagement, so I really appreciate that. Councilmember Rosengarten, did you want to make a
I
comment?
wanted to ask a question, and I know it's after the fact. So after council, the majority of council has voted for number 8, then when number 9 comes around, it's already a given that it's going to be switched on zoning. So is that something you vote yes for, simply because the majority of council has voted yes on 8? Even the person who voted nay would vote yes on 9, because you want your map to reflect what the majority of council has voted on?
I think that that's up to the individual council member.
Got it, thank you.
Ideally, I probably would have flipped 8 and 9, you know what I mean, and done the vote on
Yep.
9.
Just
before
wanted
8.
to know, because it was like, okay, majority, it's already changed.
In an ideal world,
Tonight.
one occurs years before the other.
Yeah.
But it's not uncommon for it to happen on the same agenda. I probably should have, flipped the order on this one, but
Thank you.
it's,
All right, so council, we're going to move on to our last agenda item, which is presentation, discussion, and possible action on the selection of an as-needed lighting design professional services pursuant to RFQ 2024-04-23. And I think the city administrator wants to make kind of an update to this before we move into potential action.
Well, we did, staff was consulting with the city attorney, and we do not have a reason to table it, so we can move forward with this agenda item. Just as a reminder to council, so this RFQ, this is a request for qualifications. So again, there's no price in discussion tonight. If any of you all reviewed the 3 responses we received, there are no prices listed in these statements of qualifications. So according to FP 201, this is an RFQ, request for qualifications for professional services. And the city attorney did confirm that this is, lighting design or engineering, those fall under what would qualify as a professional service, precluding it from having to go out for the formal bid with a price. So just wanted to make that aware. And whatever, if council does select a firm, staff will have a recommendation in a moment. I know it wasn't posted with the agenda, but if council does select a firm, then we enter into, based on the qualifications, then we enter into contract negotiations and can discuss and negotiate price at that point. A contract can either move forward or we can end negotiations. I just wanted you all to be briefed on that. So I'll pass it over to the Public Works Director.
So staff has reviewed all the that submitted their qualifications to us, all 3 companies and firms. All 3 are very highly qualified in different ways. We are recommending to go forth with opening up a negotiation with Arup at this time. They are specifically for lighting design. So we are looking to, that is going to be our recommendation, is to enter into negotiations for a contract with Arup. If those negotiations do not work out, our second choice would be DKS, as we would look at them as the lighting, and that's kind of where we kind of ended up on this.
Okay, Councilor Rosengarten.
I don't understand why we need to use a lighting design company when we have beautiful lights on Ernest Robles, and we can use that same type of light going down Brody or on Home Depot Boulevard.
So that is something we are going to be considering. But if the city is wanting other types of lights, like bollards or something like that, that is not something that is currently within Austin Energy's kind of standard lighting package. So if we have right here, we enter into a contract, there are no current task orders assigned to this contract. So we don't have to start utilizing them until we're ready to make the decision that, yes, we want some bollards in these locations. Yes, we want to, we know we've changed. Austin Energy says we can't use the lights because they're too close to their power line. So if we get those answers from Austin Energy at that point in time, then we can do a task order with the lighting designer company to design those lights. So it would be nice that we have the contractor and the contract and everything already negotiated while we go through that process, because then we can move forward with those projects.
Councilor Rosengarten.
I also am looking at the qualifications on Arup. They did work in New York. I'm like, this must be a major company, expensive company.
A lot of them do work all over. I think you've seen, if you look at some of the others, you may see Dallas and San Antonio and other places around too. So I think that they are, I think Arup is more, it can be somewhat international in some ways, but they're all big companies.
I'm not sure we need such a big company to do the little work that we are presenting. Thank you.
Councilor Mendicus.
On Arup, that's Christoph, right?
Yes.
So he has an Austin office? And
Yes, he's here in Austin, yeah.
He has worked all over the world.
Yes.
Because he presented at the Dark Sky.
Yes.
thing. Okay. So isn't he also working with the Hill Country Conservancy on the Violet Crown Trail?
Ooh, I can't answer that. I'm not sure. I mean, he does work all around the area, so.
Okay.
And there's some people with Arab that are from up in Dallas and some different places as well.
Mayor Pro Tem?
So you have, if I understand this correctly, a 100-point rating system for each of these firms. But unless I missed it in here, and I may have, because it's, you know, a lot of pages, I don't see the ratings that you gave to each of these firms. Did they not get published in here?
No, they weren't part of this. We just, we had mentioned on there that we would be coming with a recommendation. I mean, we can come back with those numbers. I mean, I think I could put those together fairly quickly.
Okay. I mean,
And everybody, I can tell you this, they were all like within a few points. They're all very well qualified.
Okay.
It's nothing, yeah.
Then what was your criteria for choosing Arup?
I think it was, I mean, they are very much focused on lighting. There were some things in some of the other proposals that we really, you know, liked as far as from traffic engineering and things like that. But this request that we made was for lighting, as needed lighting design.
If the RFQ had included parameters more related to traffic signalization, then I think definitely I would have scored the other two firms higher. I mean, my scores, they were all very close. Arup was not my top score, but again, after consulting with staff, after consulting with our engineer, you know, we wanted to have an engineer review the proposal. According to the parameters of the RFQ, which were very specific to lighting design in urban and, you know, urban lighting design, meaning what we want for our Reimagine Brody, and trails, if we want to, you know, have lights on you know, certain trails, then Arup, according to staff and our conversations, Arup is the most qualified. Now, if it had included traffic signalization, which the RFQ document doesn't include, I think then the other firms would be better qualified. But council also we can reject all statements, right? And we can maybe revisit the RFQ if we would like.
No, I just wanted to know what your criteria was for choosing them. And if the scores are very close, then maybe it's not interesting to see the exact things, but.
Our scores were
The difference between like each one for me was like 1 or 2 points. It's like really close.
All three were in the upper, I have my scores somewhere, we're in the upper 80s for me, so.
Councilor Medicus?
I did notice that DKS had heavy on engineering, a little bit less on kind of the lighting design of parks and walkways. And I do, having listened to Christoph's presentation and looked at some of his examples, they're amazing and they're probably very pricey. And so if we do end up negotiating with them, I would want to make sure that we made clear to him that, you know, this isn't met. And you know, it needs to be within the theme of Ernest Robles Way with lights that we can get from the city of Boston rather than custom lights that are going to cost us a fortune.
Very good.
We're looking for functionality.
Yes,
not
function
so much
first,
aesthetics.
form second.
Yes.
Councilor Johnson?
How much did that weigh? And also, last time we did this, I think we said, like, can we see the scores? I don't know what we'd do with that information, but it gives us something to say when we're up here. If it was, or how much of the scoring was they do cool stuff with lights? Was that? Like, if you just took that away totally, we're not going to be able to.
I mean,
we can afford it, but we're not going to want to be able to afford it. You know what I mean?
Again, when you're scoring these, you have to look at what are the criteria. You know, what are the criteria? You know, did they meet? I mean, a lot of it is did they put what we asked them to put in there, right? And then some of it is subjective, like, do you agree with the examples that they provided? Are they relevant? And it says, one of the council members said, one was much heavier towards traffic signal. All great examples, but not necessarily what Reimagine Brody is. However, we are wanting to make traffic signalization improvements as part of Reimagine Brody. It just, that wasn't mentioned in the RFQ, so.
Councilor Rosinger?
A question. So on the RFQ, we're not dealing with dollars, we're dealing with qualifications. So if we said they all qualify, now let's go to the next step. What is their price range? What do they charge per hour? Can we do that?
First, the city shall select an individual or firm capable on the base system. So you select an entity. You can't
just
we
say they're
can't
all
start.
qualified.
Exactly. We can't start negotiating with all three because then, so you have to select the firm, then you enter into negotiations. We could have a contract, or negotiations could fail, and then you go to the next firm.
It seems like a long process to do it that way versus saying, okay, they all qualify. Now, who can give us service for XYZ dollars? But I hear you.
Other questions or comments from council? I will note that council has indicated, and I think this is very reasonable in the direction I want to go to, that we're not going to take substantial action on Reimagine Brody next fiscal year, right? And so that does give us some buffer, for this if we're not using it for other projects, obviously, but I don't think that the negotiation timeline is necessarily something critical that we were working on. And we do want to take advantage of getting the best price possible regardless of the firm. And so I'm hopeful that they recognize the state of Sunset Valley is distinct from New York, is distinct from San Antonio, is distinct from Dallas, and we want that, right? But we also, want to have a good price.
Yeah, and I think that's why we, said we would start with one and then we can move through those entities, basically.
Right. And any task orders that come out of this would come before council. They would not be entered into an agreement and without council approval. So, any other questions before opening up for members of the public?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Melissa Gonzalez, and I'm going to put my Public Works hat on now. I do know how much, and we do know how much AirUp charges, because we have bills from them from the subcontractor work from the Reimagine Brody project, and the numbers are high. And one of the reasons I think that we're here is that Public Works recommended that we go and find some other lighting contractors. And so it concerns me that because the number was high, we went out into the process, and then we ended up with the person, and I'm a huge Christoph fan. I'm not dissing anywhere on the recommendation, because I really like Christoph. But the numbers are high. And we've already paid for the big ideas, and I think the money was well spent. I think that Christoph is brilliant, and I think the firm is brilliant, but we already paid the big idea numbers. And so the work that's going to that's coming down the pike now is not the big idea number. We don't need to be paying top dollar to do the lighting dirt work. We've got our pictures, and we also learned in this process the delta between what Austin was going to allow us to do. So I'm a little personally confused, and we can do the same thing as we did before, which was use one of our subcontractors, either the engineers or the landscaping firm, to subcontract who we want. So I'm confused as to the advantage to moving forward in this situation. So I find myself in agreement with Councilmember Rosengarten. So if we had a budget and we were saying, within this budget, what would these numbers be? And then are they reasonable for moving forward? But we found that this lovely firm that was being recommended was high, considerably higher than we anticipated, even in regards to our existing contractors. And it took a much bigger chunk than we thought we did, which is how we started this process in my memory, and I can be corrected, but that was my understanding. And so I have concerns that we're here at this moment with finances as the issue, because we already know that this contractor who we love and recommended and gave us some great ideas is on the high end of things. And that's what made us go look, So so it feels very circular to me to be in this position. And we have the option of using without doing this, of using one of our contractors that we've already approved to get subs that in fact could be more reasonable. So I'm confused as to what the advantage would be to taking this action. So I just leave you with that. If you have any questions for me, or because perhaps I wasn't clear, I'd be happy to do that. And then I'm sure the person behind me, who's actually the chair of the committee, might be able to fix it if my memory was inaccurate. But anyway, happy to answer a question.
Thank you.
Randy Rosengarten, 25 Yellowtail. I just wanted to commend Matt on his grasp and eloquent explanation of the Professional Engineering Act and invite you to teach our ethics class. But there are some constraints, and unfortunately, from a cost effectiveness standpoint, that's not a consideration in that act. You must, as a city, where there is engineering involved that affects public safety, and lighting certainly does, especially next to Brody and so forth, then you have to follow that act. And the first step is to find the most qualified firm or firms. And as Matt explained, then you enter into the contract with the most qualified. If you can't reach agreement with them, you go to the next qualified. And that's the way the process works. There's no getting around it, not for a city. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to follow up on that, so yes, price is something we cannot consider when we look at review these items. The second thing is regarding subcontracting. Any subcontracting we have, if we have our architects, engineers, or whoever we have already, whatever subcontractors they bring on, there is generally a 15% markup, so the city pays more on those subcontractors. So it's in our interest to have our own contractors, then we aren't paying that markup fee.
Mayor Protem.
One of the things I'm wondering about in this, because I share the concern over the possible cost of a contractor we know that may be highly qualified, the best qualified one, but we also know to be expensive. Is it possible for us to say in advance, here is our rough idea of a budget for this, as a point to begin the negotiations for this financially, to see if that firm feels that this is adequate or not?
I think with what we would be negotiating would be hourly rates, because we're not presenting any kind of task order at this point. We would be negotiating hourly rates, and we can definitely we can have a back and forth on those, what we find acceptable on those rates.
Right. Well, if we're negotiating hourly rates, can we come up with, again, a rough estimate of how many hours would be involved? It's kind of a question of what are we willing to spend on this, to put it another way. Because the fact that it's sort of open-ended concerns me.
I think what I would recommend is in negotiating is identifying what we think is a reasonable rate for this work, and starting with that as a point of, entry into the negotiations, and saying, this is what we think is a reasonable rate. What are your, Connors, what are your thoughts on that? Because the scope question is really going to be contingent on some of the factors that we don't have identified yet, particularly around Austin Energy's requirements and easements regarding power lines. And so the scope of work is going to be dependent on the factors that we don't have, identified yet. We could come up with a range, right? Saying the minimal project we're talking about is bollards. We assume we're using the Austin Energy standard lighting that we have on our snorvels. And so what we need is a specific, lighting for improving lighting along Brody that's outside of, what would be the street lights example for walking and pedestrian safety and biking. And that might be sort of the low end scope. And then it would go all the way up to what if we had to design our own lighting and the city was willing to pursue that, given the prioritization of the project if they wanted to do that. So I think you'd have to like kind of consider both those ranges possibly, and that might be something that we could roughly scope out. But I don't know if we could identify right now a specific narrower target.
Okay.
Is kind
I
of my
mean,
thought.
I just think we need to have a strategy for cost containment here.
Right, and I think that looking at comps, you know, for hourly rates for this type of work and saying this is what the city's willing to do, and if that firm says, you know, we're double that, we're not willing to meet that, then that shortens the negotiation, right? Which is I
Right.
think what we want to do. We don't want to get to the point of, you know, prolonging that if there's not agreement, right? So
Yeah,
I think
I mean-
that would be a good going in point. Or,
Part of where I'm coming from here is after 30 years as a software developer and watching projects go way out of budget and way
Right.
out of time, I have a concern about that happening here.
right. Councilmember Medicus?
So, just to be clear, the RFQ process, we're asking for qualifications, and that's what we have to consider. And then we could give staff direction on to, here's the price range that we want to negotiate to, and then they negotiate, and the mayor, whoever, negotiates prices at that point. With the RFP is different. You say, here's the budget, and here's the scope of work that we want you to do for this money. Is that right?
We don't always have the budget as given as well. So a lot of times with RFPs, we're asking for a specific proposal.
Where they bid us.
They tell us the scope, we tell them what the scope of what we want, and then they tell us how much it's gonna cost to make that happen.
So that's very different than qualifications and negotiation versus getting bids for how much it's gonna cost, and then we have some numbers to look at.
And if council wants to, you know, wait and say, you know, we're gonna reject all qualifications at this point until we have some more answers from Austin Energy, we can do that. That just means we'll do this process again, possibly at that point. I mean, there's no it just adds some time to either end. It doesn't, you know.
So that brings me to my other question about something you said, Matt, about the traffic lighting, and because of the heavy engineering and background that DKS has, I wonder if, and I didn't dig that far into, I mean, I read the proposals, but wondering whether that would be beneficial for the city as we go forward with negotiations with Austin versus the experience that maybe Christoph has with that. So maybe we should think about if traffic lighting is something that has to be considered in all of that, that we maybe reject these bids and really get specific about what we need when we know what we need. I don't know.
I think that
Just thinking.
may really be my recommendation. We're very, you know, again, with Reimagine Brody, it's very, very conceptual at this point. We know there are improvements. Our engineer has told us there's improvements. He would like to see all down, you know, for all the signals along Brody, both the traffic signals, right, leaving the shopping centers, the pedestrians, you know, signalizations. Obviously, we would be doing that work in conjunction, really, and under City of Austin, because Austin maintains and manages all of our traffic signals. But I don't think we have a firm answer at this time whether Austin would be doing all of that for us or we would need to.
That would be good to know.
Well, it is, yeah, and so in our contract with Austin regarding the street lights, they actually will contractually design our lights and all of that and do all that work as well, because everything has to flow, because Brody, as we know, I mean, we have a start here and it goes all the way through down 1626, and so, you know, they have a huge part of that, but we do get the cost from that, from their design as well. So we need to be able to, you know, and like Matt said, if we want to reject all bids and then look at planning for, you know, maybe bringing in somebody like DKS or Lee that's more, can do lighting and traffic and some other little pieces of it, that's fine as well. It may be more beneficial in the future, because looking with the RFQ we released was specifically for lighting design, and so.
Just a thought.
I will admit I like the idea of tabling this, and so I move to table this agenda item indefinitely, because we would need more information. If we picked one of these three, we're shooting in the dark. We have no idea. We can look at, how to say his name, ARUP, and we can look at DKS, and we can look at Lee, and we can see that they're all qualified. And then we pick one, and they might be more expensive than ARUP. Arab, I guess is how you
That's
pronounce
very
it. I
true.
don't know. And we don't know. So it'd be nice to have more information, and we have to pick one for qualification and start there, you're saying.
Yeah, we can't get pricing beforehand. We aren't going to know the pricing beforehand.
I'm gonna throw a dart. DKS would be my choice.
So rather than tabling the item, I'd recommend that we reject all bids and then bring it back after the next process, which may include a different set of requirements in the RFQ, right? So this, if it's tabled, then it's just, we're not conclusively saying that we're ending this particular action, so.
But we have to give them an answer, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct, yeah. There's not a time, we could table it, but it just means we would literally bring back the same agenda item.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's better either to reject or to make it, reject all their statements, reject all statements or select.
And not that I'm recommending this, staff makes a recommendation, that's what we have before us. Council doesn't have to follow that recommendation. You could choose to award it to a different firm, and council votes on that, right? So if council has different considerations in their mind than the staff, which are strictly looking at the requirements and the RFQ, it's up to council to actually make a decision. So that's another option. It's just that I don't think it's very, I don't necessarily want to signal, that staff makes a recommendation to council overrides it without a clear reason why, right? The council can articulate so we don't get into thorny issues, right? So I would rather, if we're down that path of not taking staff's recommendation, I'd rather reject all bids and wait until we can, we have identified more of the requirements that we need for this project, and it becomes more critical for staff this effort. So, Mayor Pro Tem.
I should have been more clear when I was talking before. I'm not against staff's recommendation. I'm just more concerned with the process that comes after that. I think we should go with staff's recommendation.
Councilmember Johnson.
In light of this discussion up here, do you guys still go with your recommendation?
I'll say that based on the RFQ that we issued, I believe that Arup is the most qualified. However, given the council discussion, given, we're considering what the task order and the budget will be, considering what the task order and budget will be for Reimagine Brody moving forward in FY25, I think it's best, just with the unknown variables, to reject all statements, and we can revisit this issue. But we do know, as Carolyn said, once we're ready for lighting and possibly traffic signal design, we may not need that, right? That may all just be under Austin, but I think once we have more information, we can possibly craft a better and more specific request for qualifications.
Councilor Rosigan.
I move that we reject all bids for our RFQ.
Is there a second for the motion to reject all statements?
I'll second that.
Councilmember Johnson seconds.
With
Yeah, right.
apologies.
Statements.
Yeah, bids, yeah, it gets into
Yeah,
like the.
it's not bids, it's, yeah,
Pending more clarification
yes.
down the road.
That opens up for discussion. Further questions or comments from council?
Yeah,
Oh, Councilmember Menegas. I couldn't tell if you had a thought and you didn't. Okay, Councilmember Menegas.
Yeah, I think it would be good to know what Austin covers as far as the traffic signals and have a little bit more information about really what we're going to need. Although, again, I have to say Christoph's work is wonderful and I love it, and but I think if we had an RFQ that really covered more detail, specific detail, instead of just saying it's just this, but I'm hearing it might be and this. So that's just my thinking.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of rejecting all statements, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right. Council, that is our last agenda item, and since Councilmember Burrell's not here, I think it falls to Councilmember Medicus to make the motion to adjourn.
adjourn.
All those in favor, well, is there a second for that motion? Or second by Mayor Pro Tem? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right, we are adjourned at 7:48 PM.
You get consent and I get adjourning. It kind of ends up that way.